Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, thank you for joining us this evening. As was told, my name is Michel Prada. I serve as the chairman of the IFRS Foundation Trustees. As you may know, the trustees oversee the operations of the foundation and the work of the International Accounting Standards Board to develop high-quality global accounting standards. Hans Gevorst is chairman of the IASB, and he will participate in the panel discussion this evening. Let me begin by thanking the Honorable Paul Chan, Financial Secretary of the Government of Hong Kong SAR, for providing the keynote speech this evening, as well as being Financial Secretary. Mr. Chan, as was mentioned, is also a trained accountant and a former president of the Hong Kong Institute of the CPAs. And therefore, he is exactly the right person to introduce this discussion about IFRS and Hong Kong, past, present, and future. And Mr. Chan, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule and look forward to your speech. I also wish to thank the Hong Kong Institute of CPAs for jointly hosting this event with us, and in particular, President Eric Tong for his leadership and friendly cooperation. Finally, I would like to pay tribute to Ron Arculi, who for the last 6 years has served admirably as our trustee from Hong Kong and vice chair of the board, and I welcome Teresa Koh as our new trustee from this region. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm old enough, unfortunately, to have been involved at the start of the IFRS project when in 2000 I chaired a meeting of securities regulators from around the world, the IOSCO. And that meeting set out an ambition to create a single set of high-quality, globally accepted accounting standards, and with it, the restructuring of the existing international standard setter. In a quirk of fate, I find myself some 18 years later as chairman of the IFRS Trustees overseeing the completion of this project. And the IFRS Foundation has published, and back in 2000, the goal of global accounting standards was more hope than expectation. And today, that goal is largely achieved. The IFRS Foundation has published profiles of a total of 166 jurisdictions. Paul Pachter played a major role in this, on its website, representing 99% of the world's GDP. Of those jurisdictions, 144 require the use of IFRS standard, while a further 12 permit their use, including the USA, for foreign companies listed on US markets. To put it another way, only 7 out of 166 jurisdictions do not allow companies domestically to report using IFRS standard, and that's a pretty good progress in the last 18 years. I would like to pay tribute to Hong Kong's leadership in this area. Hong Kong was an early supporter of IFRS and one of the first jurisdictions to adopt IFRS standards back in 2005, and your ongoing support is very much appreciated. And if I may, I would add that I was impressed during the discussions we had today to see that you have engaged the process of endorsement and adoption of one of the most controversial standards, IFRS 17, which is an example for many countries in the world, including Europe. But noting this progress, we must also recognize that the remaining 7 jurisdictions include some very large economies, namely mainland China, India, and the United States. But even here, we see positive steps toward IFRS. We have excellent relationships with mainland China, and we have seen quite remarkable progress in the last 10 years or so. Chinese accounting standards are substantially converged with IFRS standards, while plans are in place for China to incorporate all of the recently issued IFRS standards into Chinese standards. Moreover, Chinese companies representing more than 30% of the total market cap of the domestic market publish IFRS-compliant financial statements as a result of their dual listing in Hong Kong and other international capital markets. I will not elaborate on India, which is on the road. I could also mention Japan, which has made huge steps in direction of IFRS standards. And I will not elaborate on the United States, only to mention again the fact that they do recognize IFRS standards for nearly 500 companies listed from overseas in the regulated markets in the US. So while the IFRS map of the world is not yet complete, we see continued momentum and continued support for the overall objective of global standards that was set up by the G20 a few years ago. And as most significant standards have been completed, we must also focus on interpretation and consistent implementation, as well as the consequences of digitization, which is the core of our strategy for the next years. I thank you again for attending this evening. We are keen to hear your thoughts and ideas for the future. Each of the tables here this evening is being hosted by an IFRS trustee. We also have several board members and staff here, and I would just like to perhaps ask my fellow trustees to raise their hands so that you can identify them. And then the staff, so you see that you can have fruitful exchange with a number of people from the IFRS Foundation. Thank you very much. Please do use this opportunity to speak with the trustees and board members and staff. We are really keen to hear your views about our work, and we will discuss this feedback during our trustees meeting tomorrow. And finally, as the French tradition allows for New Year's wishes until end of January, this is the very last opportunity for me to wish you all a very happy New Year 2018. I wish you an enjoyable evening and look forward to an excellent speech from Financial Secretary and lively panel discussion. Thank you.